My father looked me in the eye and told me my apartment should belong to my brother instead. After everything I had done for my family, he still called me selfish. What he did not realize was that the truth would soon come out. And when it did, nobody could take it back. I spend more than 50 hours a week writing code, staring at computer screens, and sitting through endless online meetings, so where I live matters a lot to me. 3 years ago, after working hard for promotions and surviving on instant ramen in tiny studio apartments, I finally rented my dream place. It is a bright 2-bedroom apartment in a great neighborhood, and I pay $2,200 a month. It is not some luxury penthouse, but it has floor-to-ceiling windows, a modern kitchen with granite countertops, and, most importantly, a second bedroom that I turned into my home office. I spent a lot setting it up. I installed soundproof panels, bought a heavy mahogany standing desk, added 3 high-definition monitors, and created a clean background for my daily video meetings with company executives. This apartment is my safe place, and I worked hard to earn it. My older brother, Brandon, has not been as lucky. About 10 months ago, the logistics company where he worked shut down, and he lost his job without any severance pay. He and his wife, Lauren, lost their house after using up all their savings. They moved with their 2 children, Owen and Chloe, into a small 1-bedroom apartment on the edge of the city. The kids sleep on a pull-out couch in the living room, while Brandon and Lauren squeeze into a tiny bedroom where the door barely opens. I honestly felt bad for them. I love my brother and I love my niece and nephew. During those 10 months, I did everything I could to help. Every other week, I brought about $300 worth of groceries so the kids had fresh food. I also paid their $450 car payment 3 different times so the bank would not repossess their only car. On weekends, I often took the kids to the zoo or the park, giving Brandon and Lauren a few hours to deal with everything. I believed I was being a good brother. Apparently, my father disagreed. In his eyes, I was just selfish for keeping an apartment that could fit more people. My father, Victor, has always believed family comes before everything else. Last Sunday, he came over for our usual monthly dinner. I ordered Italian takeout, set the table, and we talked about the recent baseball playoffs. Then he suddenly put down his fork, wiped his mouth with a napkin, looked around my apartment, and said, "You know, Ethan, this place is far too big for one person. It is excessive." I laughed, because I thought he was joking. "Dad, it is only a 2-bedroom apartment, not a palace." He did not smile. "That is exactly my point. You have all this space while your brother's family is crammed into a tiny apartment. It makes no sense." My stomach tightened. I put down my drink and asked, "What are you trying to say?" He leaned back and replied, "I am only stating the facts. You have enough room for a whole family, while your own nephew and niece sleep in a cramped living room." I reminded him that I paid $2,200 every month for this apartment and that I needed my office because I worked from home 5 days a week. He dismissed it completely. He said I could put a desk in my bedroom or even work from the kitchen because plenty of people do that. According to him, having a separate office was unnecessary. I explained that I worked with confidential client information, had strict non-disclosure agreements, and needed a private room with a door that locked. I also told him I spent every day on video calls with executives and I could not have my bed visible in the background. He just slowly shook his head and looked at me like I had completely let the family down. "Family helps family, Ethan," he said, pointing his finger at me. "When I was your age, I would have given up my right arm for my brother. Your generation only cares about yourselves, your comfort, your personal space, and your lifestyle." That really hurt. I leaned forward and reminded him about the thousands of dollars I had given Brandon over the last year, the weekends I spent watching the kids so they could look for work, and the days I helped them pack up their house after the foreclosure while they cried. Dad just rolled his eyes. Throwing money at a problem is not real help. Real help means making sacrifices. It means giving up your extra comfort so those kids can have a proper home. The conversation turned into something completely surreal. It felt like he had planned every word before coming over. He told me Brandon and Lauren should have my master bedroom in my office while I moved into the smaller bedroom. According to him, I would still have a place to live, so I should be grateful. He even tried to sell it as a good financial deal. The rent would be split. You would only pay $1,100 a month. I stared at him. "So you expect me to pay over $1,000 every month just to live in the smallest room of the apartment that I found, rented and furnished with my own money while Brandon's family takes over everything else?" He glared at me. "I expect you to put your family first." I stood up, walked to the front door, and opened it. "This is my home. I am not giving it up. Good night, Dad." He left, but the look he gave me was pure disgust. After that, my mom, Diane, would not stop texting me. She kept saying Dad was heartbroken and that I should at least hear him out. The next day, Brandon called me. He never directly asked for my apartment, but he spent almost 40 minutes talking about how Chloe cried because she had no room to play. I knew my father had told him exactly what to say. I honestly started wondering if I was losing my mind. Was I really selfish for wanting to keep the home I paid for? I thought I had made my position perfectly clear. I believed my father would eventually realize how ridiculous his idea was and let it go. I could not have been more wrong. The next Tuesday, around 1 in the afternoon, Dad called me. He sounded completely normal. He said he was nearby at the hardware store and wanted to stop by because he thought he had noticed a small leak under my kitchen sink during his last visit. Since he used to work as a contractor and had helped me fix plumbing problems before, I believed him. I was on my lunch break between meetings, so I told him to come over. About 10 minutes later, the lobby buzzer rang. I let him in and opened the front door, but Dad was not alone. Standing there with him were Brandon, Lauren, and the kids, Owen and Chloe. "What is this?" I asked, blocking the doorway. My heart started pounding. Dad laughed and pushed past me. "Relax, Ethan. We were having lunch nearby and decided to stop in. The kids really wanted to see you." Before I could say another word, Owen and Chloe squeezed past me and ran into the living room yelling my name. I was stuck. I could not start an argument in front of the kids, so I stepped aside and shut the door. The whole leak story was fake. Dad looked under the sink for a few seconds with his phone flashlight and then shrugged. "Looks like it dried up." Then he showed what he had really come for. Before I could get everyone back to the door, he started giving Brandon and Lauren a tour of my apartment as if he were selling it. "See this living room, Brandon?" he said, pointing toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. "It gets sunlight all day because it faces south." Things got even worse. Dad looked around the apartment and said, "This place would be much better for Lauren than that dark, moldy apartment you're living in now." Lauren slowly looked around the living room. "There is so much space," she said quietly. "We could put the kids' play kitchen over there by the radiator. We could finally have family movie nights without everyone being squeezed together." I stood there in complete shock. I could not believe they were actually planning their lives inside my apartment. Then I heard Owen shout from down the hallway. I hurried over and found him standing in my office, staring at my dual monitors and mechanical keyboard. "Wow!" he yelled. "Grandpa was right. This room is huge. This can be my bedroom. I want my bed right there." He pointed straight at my standing desk. Lauren walked over and rested her hand on my shoulder. "It really is a beautiful room, Ethan. Uncle Ethan uses this as his office, Owen," she told him. Then she quietly turned to Brandon. "If we put bunk beds against that wall, we would still have room for a dresser and a toy chest. It would fit perfectly." Brandon never said a word. He just stared at the floor and avoided looking at me. His silence said everything. He was not stopping this. He was letting it happen. I grabbed Dad by the arm and pulled him into the hallway. "What the hell are you doing?" I asked through clenched teeth. He acted innocent. "I am just showing them around. There is nothing wrong with looking at the possibilities." "You are acting like they are already moving into my apartment. You brought them here to pressure me." Dad's expression instantly changed. "I am showing them what family is supposed to do. Look at your brother. He is drowning and you are refusing to help because you want an extra room for your computer." "I work as a software engineer for a Fortune 500 company," I shot back. "That office is my job." While we argued, Chloe wandered into my bedroom. Dad immediately followed her. "Lauren, come look at these closets," he called out. "They are huge. You could finally unpack your clothes instead of living out of garbage bags. You deserve better." Lauren walked into my bedroom, and I felt sick. She ran her hand across my duvet. "Our king-size bed would fit in here if we moved the nightstands," she quietly told Brandon. That was it. I completely snapped. "The tour is over," I shouted, clapping my hands. "Everyone out, right now. Get your coats." Dad turned bright red. "Do not raise your voice at me in front of the family." "This is my apartment," I yelled, pointing at the front door. "I pay for it. I signed the lease. I take care of it. I am not a hotel, I am not a charity, and I am not giving away my home because you decided my life matters less than Brandon's." Brandon finally spoke. "Ethan, nobody is saying that." "Really?" I cut him off. "Dad has made it clear that because I do not have a wife and kids, my career, my privacy, and my life do not matter. So what is next? Do I give you my car too? Do I empty my retirement savings so you can buy a house?" The kids immediately realized something was wrong. Chloe started crying and hid behind Lauren. Dad glared at me. "Look what you did. You scared your niece. You have become selfish, cold, and pathetic. I failed as your father. I looked him in the eyes. Get out, I said quietly. Leave my apartment before I call the police and have all of you removed for trespassing. Nobody argued anymore. They walked toward the door in silence. Brandon stopped before leaving. Without looking at me, he quietly said, I am sorry, Ethan. I did not know he was going to do this. We are just desperate. We can barely live in that place. Then deal with it like an adult, I replied before slamming the door. I did not wait. Within an hour, I had a locksmith replace every deadbolt in the apartment. It cost me $250. But I knew Dad had secretly copied my keys during one of his previous visits. Right after that, I called my property manager, Mr. Collins. I immediately explained to Mr. Collins that under no circumstances was anyone to be added to my lease or allowed into my apartment unless I gave written, notarized permission. He sounded confused but promised to place a strict note on my tenant file. I was sitting in my office afterward, still shaking from the adrenaline. Part of me felt guilty knowing my nephew slept on a couch while I had all this space, but I refused to give in. Helping family does not mean destroying my own life to fix theirs. I explained to Mr. Collins that under absolutely no circumstances was anyone to be added to my lease or allowed into my apartment without my written, notarized permission. He sounded confused, but promised to put a permanent note on my tenant file. I was sitting in my office afterwards, still shaking from the adrenaline. The guilt kept trying to creep in because my nephew was sleeping on a couch while I had this beautiful apartment. But I refused to let it win. Helping family does not mean setting myself on fire to keep them warm. About 6 weeks later, things got even worse. It was my mom's 56th birthday, and she wanted a big family dinner at my parents' house. Even though I had not spoken to Dad since everything happened, I decided to go. I was not going to let him push me out of my own family. I showed up right on time with an expensive bouquet of flowers and a $200 gift card to her favorite spa. My younger sister, Madison, was already there. She has always been the rebel in the family, and the moment she saw me, she gave me a knowing look. Team apartment or team cult? She whispered as I poured myself a glass of ice water. Team I just want to eat cake and leave in peace, I whispered back. She laughed. Good luck. Dad has been pacing the living room for the last hour practicing his guilt trip. Dinner actually started off peacefully. Mom made her famous garlic butter pot roast with roasted carrots and potatoes. The kids were happily eating, and everyone was pretending the apartment fight had never happened. We talked about the weather, Madison's new dog, and Mom's garden. Then just as Mom stood up to cut the birthday cake, Dad cleared his throat and tapped his fork against his wine glass until the whole room went silent. So, Ethan, he said, have you had enough time to think about your selfish behavior? Have you changed your mind about the apartment? I answered without raising my voice. There is nothing to think about. My answer is still no. Please pass the cake. Mom nervously asked, what apartment? Even though it was obvious she already knew. Dad ignored her. Ethan has decided his comfort and his little computer room are more important than giving his own niece and nephew a proper place to live. He made sure Owen and Chloe heard every word. Leave the kids out of this, I snapped. Dad kept going like I had not spoken. One person living in a 2-bedroom apartment while 4 people are packed into 1 bedroom. Anyone with common sense can see how unfair that is. Madison slammed her fork onto the table. Using that logic, should I give up my apartment too? Should I go live under a bridge so Brandon can have it? Dad waved her off. That is different. You barely earn minimum wage. Ethan makes 6 figures. He has the money and the space. I gripped the edge of the table. I worked 60 hours a week for those resources. I earned that apartment. I sacrificed my 20s to build my career so I could finally afford a place like that. Brandon, who had been quietly pushing a carrot around his plate, finally spoke. Actually, things might be looking up. I did not want to say anything yet because I did not want to jinx it, but I just had a 3rd interview with a major logistics company downtown. The pay is great, and it comes with full benefits. I smiled. That is amazing, Dave. Seriously, congratulations. For one brief moment, I honestly believed that would finally end the apartment argument. Instead, Dad immediately cut him off. Even if he gets the job, it will still take 6 to 8 months to save enough for a security deposit, first month's rent, and moving costs. Their credit was destroyed after the foreclosure. No landlord is going to rent to them without a huge deposit. Meanwhile, Ethan has empty rooms, sitting there doing nothing. I use those rooms every single day, I shouted, finally losing my calm. My office is not some extra room, I shot back. That is where I earn the money you keep expecting me to give Brandon. Dad slammed his fist on the table so hard the wine glasses shook. You could work from a Starbucks. Plenty of young people work from coffee shops. It is trendy. You just want to isolate yourself. I work with proprietary software for a technology company, I fired back. I'm under strict non-disclosure agreements. I cannot handle confidential company information over public Wi-Fi while someone is making coffee next to me. That is insane. Dad shook his head. Excuses. Nothing but selfish excuses from a weak man. That was when Mom finally broke. Victor, stop. Just stop, she cried, tears running down her face. It is Ethan's apartment. We cannot force him out of his own home. You are ruining my birthday. Dad immediately turned on her. Of course you are taking his side, Diane. You have always babied him. You are encouraging his greed and tearing this family apart. Mom looked him straight in the eye. Her voice was shaking, but she did not back down. I am not encouraging greed. Forcing your own son to give up his home is not charity. It is theft. You are trying to steal from him. Dad jumped to his feet so fast his chair crashed onto the floor. When I was younger, family meant sacrifice. My brother let me sleep on his couch for 6 months when I had nothing. That is what family does. Madison stood up too. He let you sleep on his couch. He did not force himself into your house, take your bedroom, and make you pay the rent while you slept in a closet. You have completely lost your mind. You need therapy. The whole room exploded. Everyone was yelling at once. Lauren quickly grabbed Owen and Chloe, who were both crying, and rushed them outside. Brandon looked like he wanted to disappear. Right then, I realized there was no point arguing anymore. My father had become obsessed with controlling my life because he wanted me to fix Brandon's problems. I stood up, put $50 on the table for the meal I was not even going to finish, and walked toward the front door. If you walk out that door, you are turning your back on this family, Dad shouted after me. I stopped and looked back one last time. No, Dad, you are the one who pushed me out. Goodbye. I drove home without saying a word. Later that night, Madison texted me, You are not crazy. Dad seriously needs help. Do not give in. I love you. A little later, Brandon sent me a message too. I am so sorry. I never asked him to do this. I will get this job, get back on my feet, and leave you alone. Please forgive me. Then, at 11:45 that night, Dad texted me. Those empty rooms will not take care of you when you are old. Until you apologize to your brother, you are dead to me. I never answered. I blocked his number instead. A couple of months later, Brandon actually got the job. Thank God they had finally started saving money. My mom kept begging me to make peace before the holidays, so I finally unblocked Dad after 2 months of silence. He had completely stopped talking about the apartment, so I foolishly believed he had finally let it go. Then last Tuesday he called and asked if we could meet for coffee. Just the two of us. He sounded calm, almost like the father I remembered. He even said he wanted to apologize for how he acted at Mom's birthday. I believed him. We met at a small cafe called The Roasted Bean a few blocks from my apartment. When I walked in, he was already waiting, but he was not just drinking coffee. There were 3 thick manila folders spread across the table. My stomach dropped the second I saw them. I sat down, but kept my coat on. What is all this? I asked. Dad casually tapped the first folder. Just a little research. I've been reading about multi-generational living. Did you know single men living alone in large apartments create much more carbon emissions than families? I even brought the studies. I just stared at him. You told me you wanted to apologize, and instead you brought environmental research to make me feel guilty about my apartment? Dad calmly opened the second folder. I am just showing you the facts. Besides, he paused for effect. Lauren is pregnant again. Everything around me seemed to stop. What? I asked. Dad smiled. She is 3 months pregnant. There is another baby coming. There is no way they can stay in that 1-bedroom apartment with 2 kids and a newborn. Dad dismissed that immediately. They still do not have the credit to rent a bigger place. Then he pushed the 3rd manila folder across the table. That is why I solved the problem myself. My hands started shaking as I opened it. Inside was a lease addendum from my apartment management company. It was paperwork to add Brandon and Lauren to my lease as co-tenants, but that was not the worst part. My signature was already on it. It was a terrible forgery of my handwriting. My face went completely numb. You forged my signature on a legal document? I asked. Dad did not even look embarrassed. I just sped things up. I spoke with Mr. Collins and told him you changed your mind. I already submitted Brandon and Lauren's paperwork. They have been approved. They move in on the 1st of next month. I stared at him in disbelief. Have you completely lost your mind? That is felony fraud. You forged my name on a legal contract. Keep your voice down, he snapped. I did what needed to be done. You are too selfish to see the bigger picture. Besides, it is already settled. I already collected the deposit from Brandon. I froze. What deposit? My apartment does not need a new deposit. Dad smiled proudly. I told Brandon you finally agreed to let them move in, but you wanted a good faith payment first. I collected $4,400 from him, all the money he had saved from his new job, for the first and last month's rent. I am keeping it in my account so you do not waste it on electronics. They are already packing. My mind completely shut down. Dad had not only tried to force me out of my own apartment, he had tricked Brandon too. He had taken Brandon's savings by lying that I had agreed to everything, and he was keeping the money himself. He had trapped both of us. If I refused now, Brandon would think I had changed my mind at the last second, while Dad would still have his money. You are a monster, I said quietly. You stole from Brandon and you committed fraud against me. You are a criminal. Dad slammed his hand on the table. I am the head of this family. I manage our resources. You are going home, packing up your office, moving into the small bedroom, and welcoming your brother next week. Then he looked me straight in the eye. Otherwise, I will tell everyone you took Brandon's money and backed out of the deal. He was blackmailing me. He had built the whole situation so I would have no way out. He was willing to destroy both of his sons just to prove he was in control. I did not yell. I did not argue. I quietly picked up the forged lease, folded it, and slipped it into my jacket pocket. Dad suddenly looked nervous. Where are you going with that? He demanded. To the police, I answered. Then I'm going to Mr. Collins' office. Dad jumped across the table, knocking over his coffee as he tried to grab my jacket. Ethan, give me that paper. Do not disrespect me. I stepped back and watched the coffee drip onto his shoes. You picked the wrong son to play these games with. It is over, Dad. I turned around and walked out while he shouted after me. Everything fell apart after that, but it had to happen. The second I left the coffee shop, I called Mr. Collins. I explained everything, showed him examples of my real signature and the fake one, and warned him that my company's legal department would get involved because of the forged lease. Mr. Collins was horrified. He immediately canceled the addendum, destroyed the paperwork, and permanently banned my father from the building. But I knew that was not enough. Dad knew where I lived. He was completely unstable, and I was convinced he would show up on moving day with a rented truck. Brandon, Lauren, and the kids, trying to force his way inside. That was when I decided to take the nuclear option. I paid the 2-month penalty to break my lease early. It cost me almost $4,500, but I decided my peace of mind was worth it. For the next 3 days, I searched nonstop until I found a modern 1-bedroom apartment with a large den that was perfect for my office. It was on the opposite side of Chicago, cost $2,000 a month, and was inside a gated building with security 24 hours a day. I did not tell anyone where I was moving except Madison. I hired movers, and at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, we packed everything I owned into a truck. By sunrise, I was gone. I left the keys on the kitchen counter, locked the door behind me, and drove away. Once I was safely inside my new apartment, I sent one final message. I created a group chat with Dad, Mom, Brandon, Lauren, Madison, and several relatives. I explained everything from beginning to end. I attached a clear photo of the forged lease, but the biggest revelation was about the money Dad took from Brandon. I wrote, Brandon, Dad lied to you. I never agreed to give you my apartment. He forged my signature on legal paperwork. The $4,400 you gave him for the deposit was a scam. He stole your savings to trap both of us. I broke my lease, moved away, and nobody should go to my old apartment. Get your money back from Dad. Then I turned my phone off for 2 full days and slept almost 14 hours on a mattress lying on the floor. When I finally turned my phone back on, I had 147 text messages, 42 missed calls, and 18 voicemails. The entire family had exploded. Madison told me Brandon went straight to my parents' house after finding out the truth and nearly got into a fistfight with Dad in the front yard. He demanded his $4,400 back, but Dad refused, claiming he had already spent it on family expenses. We all knew that really meant he had used it to pay off his own credit card debt, expecting me to cover Brandon's loss later. Mom was disgusted by everything Dad had done. She packed 2 suitcases and moved in with her sister in Ohio. She told him she would not come back until he repaid every cent to Brandon and got serious psychological help. Dad still refused to admit he had done anything wrong. On the first day of the month, he actually showed up at my old apartment with a rented moving truck because he convinced himself I was bluffing. Instead of finding me there, he found the property manager showing the empty apartment to new tenants. He caused such a huge scene that building security had to restrain him and call the police. He was escorted away in handcuffs and officially banned from the property. Thankfully, Brandon and Lauren ended up okay. His new employer gave him a payroll advance after he explained the situation, and they rented a decent 2-bedroom townhouse in the suburbs. It was not luxurious, but it was clean, safe, and big enough for the new baby. Brandon later sent me a long apology. He admitted that part of him had hoped Dad would pressure me into giving up the apartment, and he was ashamed he let everything go that far. I forgave him, and we slowly started rebuilding our relationship without Dad. As for my father, he ended up completely alone. Most of the family cut him off. Even his own brothers called him a thief and a disgrace. Since I blocked his number, he started sending long emails, sometimes insulting me, sometimes begging me to tell him where I lived so we could fix the family. I deleted every message without reading past the first line. Now I am sitting in my new office, listening to my keyboard and looking at my monitors while the apartment stays quiet. I can see the Chicago skyline through the window, and nobody is counting my rooms or planning how to take them from me. I have not felt this peaceful in years. The funniest part is that my old apartment sat empty for 3 months because hardly anyone who needed that much space could afford $2,200 a month, and management refused to lower the rent. Dad spent months trying to take my apartment away, and in the end, nobody got it. He lost his wife, pushed both of his sons away, and exposed himself as a fraud. I learned one painful lesson through all of this. Being single and not having children does not make my life less valuable. The things I worked for are not family property. Sometimes the only way to beat a rigged game is to walk away from it completely.